I'm Tyler Don Rosenquist, and my messy office still moving in. My books are kind of everywhere. Plus, you know me, I've got, not only do I have books all over the place back there, got them in every room piled up in what I'm going to study depends on what room that I'm in at the moment. If I'm going to study one thing, I have different chairs that I sit in based on where the books are. Anyway, so yeah, sorry for the mess. Anyway, I want to talk today about self-control. Self-control is a real journey, probably more than any other fruit of the Spirit, and every fruit of the Spirit links into self-control. Now, when we're first, the truth is there are a lot of unbelievers who have more self-control than unbelievers. Some families really emphasize the fact that we don't say everything that is on our minds, that not everything we're thinking is inspired by the Holy Spirit, and that usually we are just almost completely driven by the flesh. But in general, when people who have not been raised in a believing household, and even some who have, when they come to faith, and God starts working in their lives, generally at first, they will like with me, oh my gosh, I swore like a sailor. Well, 2 weeks after being saved, somebody noticed I didn't swear anymore. Well, it wasn't a matter of self-control, I just didn't do it anymore. It wasn't something I'd done on purpose. I actually happened to enjoy it. It was like my favorite pastime. And so that wasn't a matter of self-control. That was God saying, I need to clean up your witness. Okay, seriously, because if you're representing me like that, you are not going to talk about me with, out of that mouth. All right. So, like I said, that's not self-control. That is just God changing a person. That is what we call a sign and a wonder. And I know people think of signs and wonders has to be raising the dead. No, when someone who swore as much as I did suddenly stopped swearing without even thinking about it, that's a sign and a wonder. And everybody noticed. Everybody in my life noticed. Anyway, but what happens over the years, because it's an ongoing process, is, God won't show us everything we're doing wrong all at once. Thank goodness, or, we kill ourselves, because who could deal with that kind of devastating news? Like, oh my gosh, I'm that bad. But, God will show us, the Holy Spirit's like our mother, counselor, comforter, I don't know where people get these Holy Spirits that tell them things like, that person's horrible. The Bible means this, fills in context that isn't there, and they get this revelation of craziness. No. 99.9% of the time when the Holy Spirit speaks to me, it's, Tyler, think about what you're doing. Tyler, stop. And if that doesn't work, it's, Tyler, go apologize. Holy Spirit's generally not telling me how other people should behave, telling me how I should behave. And that's the point. You've got that maternal wisdom of the Spirit. And of course, wisdom throughout the scriptures is always described in terms of a feminine. All of the spiritual gifts that Paul talks about in Galatians in the first century were womanish. If a man in an honor-shame society went around being loving, joyful, peaceful, patient, kind, good, gentle, faithful, self-controlled, he'd be labeled a pansy. It was countercultural. Counterculture, fruit of the Spirit. Far more maternal. The kind of traits that were admired and cultivated in women, but really shunned in men. You didn't want that. Okay. So, and if you want more information on this, I never mentioned this really, but my dear friend, Dr. Dina Dye, she has a book called The Temple Revealed in Creation, A Portrait of the Family. I'll put a little thing up about it. And she talks about the fact that, until the 4th century, all Christian writings, all, Jewish writings, they all described the Ruach, the Holy Spirit, as feminine. So it wasn't until, times really started changing and the effect of the Roman Church really started bearing down on the world, that the Ruach was recast as neutral or male. And anyway, that's beside the point. But like I said, in my life, the Ruach serves this very maternal function, teaching me how to become more and more conformed to the image of Messiah, who of course is the very image of the unseen God, shows us what his character is all that. And to be like Yeshua is our goal, to be image bearers of God. We were created in God's image. When Adam and Eve rebelled, they gave up being his perfect image bearers. Up to that point, they were his perfect image bearers. You know, they were representing God's will upon the earth, his goodness. When they rebelled, they really, well, it didn't go well. So, self-control. Self-control, and here I am laying in bed last night, and I should have known I was going to be tested, okay? When you get a big revelation about your character in the middle of the night, and when something clicks and something changes immediately, you know, you can bet in the morning there's going to be someone there to trip you up. And it happened, and I fell for it. Oh my gosh, it's so awful. And I knew, anyway, okay, I'm going to go back. So, you know, as we go, the Ruach reveals something to us about our character, and then we make a conscious effort to control ourselves in that area and to change the way we act. Okay, it's not always easy, and it's a stumbling thing, just like any child and any adult, you know, we never really outgrow that need for behavioral modification. And so we become, but as we put out an effort, God meets us. You know, he makes it, as we make an effort, he makes an effort, and you know, we don't always do it right, and he doesn't always give us a big jump in maturity, but that's how we become mature. It's like I say, it's like you know, we're building a resistance to whatever that bad character flaw, and after a while, the behavior that was once forced becomes natural, commonplace. It's real and not a struggle. So, but at first, you know, when we don't even know that a certain behavior is wrong, we're not going to control it. We're not going to seek to control it. Why would we? You know, there are people who are believers who gossip, you know, and they don't see anything wrong with it. They literally don't see any problem with it. Others just are argumentative and divisive. Others are self-seeking. They're seeking, I see people out there seeking for an audience. I see people who, I call them the drive-by police. You know, they correct, they hit your wall. You know, they hit your social media wall, they correct something, then they're gone. Then they're not around to deal with the, you know, the big argument that ensues. Or if they are, you know, they're just kind of peripherally involved. They don't take ownership over what they've just done. And, you know, they think, well, you know, I just introduced truth into this situation. But what they did was they started something someone else has to deal with. You know, that's really not cool. It just takes self-control. If you had any idea how often I go down my social media newsfeed, and actually that's not very often anymore, and I just go, oh my gosh, and I know that I've done the research that debunks something. Or something is just based on whatever, or, you know, somebody, you know, learned Hebrew from Rabbi Google, or Greek from, I don't know who you would, never mind, you know, whoever, I can't make anything, I can't, and they're getting it wrong, completely in ignorance. You know, they've just received bad information. They haven't studied very deeply. They just look at surfaces, or somebody told them a good story and they're passing it on. Well, that's all just signs of lack of control. Whenever we just rush forward with something that we don't know is true, you know, that's another form of a lack of control. But after a while, you know, we go to the point where we can't control it, and then God's actively working with us to control it. And then at some point, when we get into the walk, we get to the point where I got to last night, which was pretty profound. And you're gonna go, duh. But it's one thing to know something intellectually and another thing to know something inside. And so what happened was last night I was laying in bed, and I was praying, and all of a sudden it just, bam, bam. It was like I was thinking about, because the one area where I do not control myself sometimes whenever I'm stressed out is in eating. Okay, I want to eat what I want to eat when I want to eat it. And, sometimes I'll go and I'll have great self-control for a while, then I'll get stressed out. And here's the thing, and it's not only with eating, okay? It's also with like getting into arguments on social media, letting someone get my goat, whatever, yelling at my kids when I really need to, take a moment, is that as I'm starting the behavior, I know darn well, even in the back of my mind, I can sense it now. It wasn't always like this, but I've reached a level where I'm doing things at least somewhat with knowledge. I'm not always aware, but I look back and I go, you know what? I really did, yeah, and I talked myself out of it. Anyway, so, you're getting ready to do something and you hear, the Ruach's like, I think you ought to take a time out. And it's like going, well, I know that in most situations taking a time out would be suitable. However, this is different because blah, 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 blah. No, like you've never done it. Come on. We're all pretty much the same, aren't we? Anyway, and so then I do it and something causes me to regret it. And I realize, what, if I had the world does not need my input right this second on everything. Unless a child is putting their actual hand into an actual fire, there aren't that many situations in this world where I have to talk right now and can't wait. But, arrogant, no, I have to. I just have to. So last night, I was kind of lamenting, and I was worrying about some things with getting my kids transferred from totally homeschooled to partially, into the public school. Get them in the welding program. Another story. Anyway, and that's been going kind of weird, and I've been kind of worried and everything, and all of a sudden, I realized it's like, in order to control yourself, there has to be a desire to control yourself. And that's often the cusp of when we get in trouble and when we stay out of trouble. Did I want to control myself in the situation? And I honestly look at so many times in my life, and no, I did not want to control myself. I either wanted that taste in my mouth, just not on my hips, or, right here, I'm like Carrie Fisher, I'm like Princess Leia. I put my weight on right here. I wish that was the only place. You realize that you're getting out of control and you realize you're crossing the line, but for some reason you feel justified. I feel justified, and my desire to do it outweighs my desire to control myself, for whatever reason. And it's sad, but it's absolutely the truth. So here I am in bed thinking, all right, I really do want to control myself. Why does a believer want to control themselves? Because frankly, if we don't control ourselves, we make God look bad. If I just read something in any old book and I just rush out to teach it without checking it against other sources and without really looking to see if it's true, okay, well, that's not self-control. That's called regurgitating. It's called just wanting to impress people with my knowledge. Well, that's terrible, and I used to do it all the time. Now I really have put a damper on that, and I make sure that, I've got my documentation and I can say something with integrity and credibility. But it can be that. It can be, someone says something that makes me angry, and I want to say something, right now, That's not for the purpose of honoring God, even though I may tell myself that's the reason. I may tell myself that I'm defending God, but really I'm irritated that someone doesn't agree with me, and so I'm out to remedy the situation. Yeah, that's not cool. That's not cool, and I mostly stopped doing that, but okay. Yeah, not always. Hey, I'm only 47 years old. I haven't even grown up yet, right? So, we've got all these situations where we decide that we want to not have self-control. But self-control is the difference between whether my actions make God look good or bad. Because I'm an image bearer. When I go out and I say, I am a teacher, I'm a Bible teacher. I teach the ancient Near Eastern and first century context of Scripture. I teach character. And usually, as you all know, I teach character by getting it wrong and then telling you what I did wrong and say, learn from my bad mistake. I can always serve as a bad example if nothing else. So, every time I lose my self-control, I misrepresent God's lovingness, peacefulness, joyfulness, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness. I missed some. And definitely self-control, because we aren't all dead. And so, man, self-control on steroids, on divine steroids. When I don't exercise any of the fruits of the Spirit, I'm misrepresenting God's character. But especially with self-control, because self-control is a choice. Now, it's a choice that's very, very hard at first. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, if you have been overeating every single day of your life and you have been eating nothing but junk food, it takes a sizable amount of, the self-control that it takes is not as much as it takes for one of these big workout guys who eats healthy all the time, and then he has a cupcake, and then the next day he really wants another cupcake, but he says, you know what, that was nice for one day, but I really don't need that. And he just goes and he doesn't think about the cupcake anymore. Or maybe he thinks about the cupcake, but just not that much. I'd be thinking about the cupcake. Even though I'd have one dessert a week. But, I'm still thinking about that day that I get to do that. But self-control grows. But we have to want it. That person who is, overeating every day, and even sometimes these skinny people who do it, they have the same problem. It's just, their metabolism. But it doesn't matter. Same problem. Same lack of self-control. So, when you start, you want to, but you don't really want to. You have to change your mindset. You have to want to. And with our life as believers, what we have to be motivated by. And it's not going to work. If we're only in it for ourselves to look better, we're only going to go so far with our growth, and then we're going to stop. Because then we're going to make compromises. Because they're going to say, well, in this group, being argumentative makes you look good. So I'll just be really argumentative, and I will foster that flesh that wants to be argumentative, and I will not control myself. But see, that's not really self-control. That is conforming to societal norms. And even if it's a small society, like on a no-holds-barred Facebook group, it's not what makes us look good to others always. It's what makes us most look like God's character expressed through Yeshua, Jesus. That takes self-control. It almost always requires us saying no to the things we want. It means saying no to, my ministry would look a lot better if I started preaching about all these sensationalistic things that a lot of people want to hear. But what am I called to do? Well, I'm called to teach the Bible. I'm called to teach this stuff to kids. I'm called, I have certain callings in my life. And yeah, I could be more relevant. And I'll tell you something, if I was preaching and writing about certain things, I could be raking in the money. But is that what I'm there for. And I would be better liked and I would be better loved, among a larger portion of, the people out there on Facebook. But is that why I'm there? Am I there to look good? Am I there to promote my character and my ego and my ministry and all this stuff? Or am I there to promote everyone being conformed to God's image, which is hard, and which almost never comes with, a lot of profits. Not those kind of profits. Doesn't come with a lot of glamour, glitz, or fame, or approval even sometimes. But it doesn't matter. When you're being peaceful, people who are warlike, who, Yeshua flipped over tables once. And when you consider the kind of stuff that he had to deal with, can you even imagine the amount of self-control that took? Now, I would be wanting to flip over the tables and whip people all the stinking time. Why? Because I do not have Yeshua's level of self-control. And he only did it when the temple was being defiled. Twice when the temple was being defiled. Otherwise, he was not turning over tables and making whips. Do we have that amount of self-control, or are we, turning over tables and making whips when somebody uses the pronunciation that we don't like, or somebody uses the calendar we don't like, or whatever, so peace is a big one. Peace is one of the hardest areas of self-control, and like I said, in the middle of the night last night, I realized that I had to want self-control for God's sake. It was kind of a paradigm shift. It was kind of something I knew in the periphery, but it was also something that was like, wow, and I could feel something just click in my whole body, one of those things. So I'm thinking about this. Okay, I have the capacity to decide in every single situation, unless I really get taken for surprise, which doesn't really happen that often anymore. Did this morning. Tyler, should have known. And I did know. I warned myself all night. We're not going there. So, you've got this thing. I want to be self-controlled, not for my own sake, but for God's sake, because my lack of self-control makes him look like a punk. Makes him look like he hasn't changed me, because people who haven't known me for very long, they don't see the changes. They don't go, wow, she's really different. They go, wow, what a jerk. They don't have the long picture. And when we're out and about among new people, we can't expect them to look back and say, well, yeah, but I know what she used to be like. No, all they see is what's in front of them. And so we have to constantly be striving for perfection. To be like, to be a rebel, to be image bearers, to bear the image of God's character out in the world. That's our job. That is everyone's job. Everyone's ministry job is to do that. And, really, if people would look at that and look at what a great responsibility and what a lifetime struggle that is, I think fewer people would be looking for internet ministries or ministry opportunities in general, because they'd be, dang, I got it wrong again. I really got it, and after you have a ministry is the worst time to start working on your character, because it won't work. At that point, you go, I got an audience. I don't need to. Well, not everybody, but too many. Okay. So, like I said, peace, patience. Patience is probably the area where I show God's character the least. And, I really lament over that. And, I feel myself building, and I say, I have a choice. Ah! Okay, so much for that choice. I didn't make the right choice, but I had the opportunity to make the right choice. So, love, joy. Let's see. Oh, joy. Joy and mourning are combined, when we talk about self-control. There are some things we cannot control. What we cannot control are our hurts and feelings. Those have to be healed. As somebody who just came through after 17 years of postpartum depression, after a series of miscarriages in my late 20s, early 30s, that depression, I didn't realize it for what it was, but it affected my ability to be joyful for when my friends would get pregnant. Absolutely. so many, I wasn't able to be joyful with them. Now, when that was finally dealt with by God, and he healed me in a very excruciating way, finally I find, I'm able to be joyful. I'm glad that my friend Sarah's pregnant. I'm glad that actually both of my friends that are pregnant are Sarah's. That's funny. So, but for the first time, I'm happy. Now, at this point, I have a choice to go back and be, well, I've never, given birth, so I don't see why I should be happy for them. Well, no, that would just be immature. That's a choice. And it would be silly, and of course I'm happy for them. I just wasn't happy when I was sad. We can't do anything about that, but we can control our responses. If every time one of my friends had announced a pregnancy, I would say, oh, well, that ought to be nice, me and Mrs. Fertile Myrtle the Turtle, and, making your little announcement, making me feel like garbage, da-da-da-da. Yeah, just suck the joy out of the room. That's not self-control. That is boorish. That is evil and nasty. And even if you are hurting, there's no excuse for externally doing things. But external self-control, often comes before internal self-control. They're all tied together. Sometimes we control our behaviors even though our feelings aren't following along. And of course, feelings can be controlled, but it takes a long time, and we got to do it correctly, or we're just Cleopatra, queen of denial, stomping it down, pretending it doesn't exist. Gentle is a lot about self-control. A lot of times we feel like we have to be brutal, but evidently we don't, according to the Bible. Faithful, loyalty, being steadfast, that sort of stuff, that takes a lot of self-control. And I mean, what we see over and over and over again. So what was the punchline after all that last night? Got on this morning, saw that somebody had said something patently untrue on one of my threads. And actually, I'd been thinking about that situation before I went to bed, and I said, I got to control myself. I got to control myself because I knew something was off. I had a feeling I was being used, had a feeling I was being set up, but I'm not really good with conceiving that kind of stuff. And so in the morning I said, you know what, I've said what I'm going to say, and I don't need to say anything more. And I knew I wasn't supposed to say anything more, and then I saw that comment. And I start typing my response. And all the while I'm going, I really said last night that I wasn't going to respond to this again. But that was before I saw this. And so now it's okay. Well, what was I doing? That entire time, I was making a conscious decision to convince myself that not controlling myself was okay. And I did, and what I did was right, but it was also wrong. And I had, and then I regretted it later. So, what are we going to do? Anyway, so that is this week, Small Bites of Fruit, self-control. And so, whenever God shows you something and you make a big breakthrough, remember, you're about to be tested, and you're probably going to fail. Take it in stride, take it in grace, and learn from it. And don't do it again. So, that's it for this week. Take care. I love you.